This video is intended only for mature audiences. Viewer discretion is advised. Hello everyone. On today's story we have a very special guest, Horror Stories with the Baron. He will be doing the voice of Alex, and he also wrote the story that you will be hearing today. His username on Reddit is Seething Entropy, if you would like to check out more of his work. His YouTube channel is Horror Stories with the Baron, which will be linked below if you would like to listen to more of his work. I thank him absolutely so much for helping me out with this video and letting me narrate his amazing story. So, without further ado, let's get creepy.
It's a full moon on a Saturday, for crying out loud.
My brother Alex shouted over his spooky Halloween mix. His head periodically popped out of the plywood abomination covering his lawn like a human whack-a-mole.
There's no way I'm gonna miss it.
I sighed and zipped up my jacket. Even during the day, the early October wind was biting. Don't you think it's a bit much? I asked. No one is trick-or-treating this year.
I won't be outdone. The Hendersons are into it.
His hand whipped out of the maze and pointed aggressively to the yard across the street. The neighbor's intimidating display consisted of a single orange bag of leaves with a jack-o'-lantern face on the front. Every year, Alex adds new pieces to his already elaborate Halloween decorations. That creature had now evolved into this short maze, starting on the sidewalk and ostensibly ending at the front door. My sister-in-law gives out the candy, and Alex operates a new jump scare from somewhere within. I think this year he was a giant trapdoor spider or something. He even built a chicken door halfway through in case kids needed to bail. My brother has many interesting feelings about the holiday, one of which is that candy should be earned, and that the more of it he keeps for himself, the more he has won. I love him anyway. I felt a tug on my hand. "Can I go in yet, Dad?" Lily asked. I told her to hang on until Uncle Alex gave the all clear. He was still tearing through the maze, turning props around and throwing blankets over grislier scenes. If he wanted to use my 5-year-old as a test subject, he'd have to tone it down to the before 7 o'clock setting. Maybe he really thought he'd learn something from a test run, but I think he was just excited to share his passion with someone else. Lily hopped around in excitement. The cardboard discs sandwiching her threatened to fall apart with every jump. We had sat down one night and Googled costume ideas, but her mind was made up from the get-go. She insisted on being a button. Whatever, it was super easy, and her costume was already done a month ahead of the date. Celebratory sounds grew louder as my brother emerged from the entrance.
Okay, kiddo, are you ready?
Alex asked in a loopy ghost voice. Lily nodded and bolted forward.
Whoa, whoa, whoa.
Alex called.
It's dangerous to go alone.
He grinned at me as he untied a line of string. Out of the verge, a dummy Alex had intended to be a clown was propped up in a lawn chair. He made it from his clothes, stuffed with more clothes, and then threw a clown wig on it. I assumed he'd refine it before the big day. Right then, it was just a lump of laundry sporting a polka dot shirt and a wig. A single foil balloon was tied to the arm of the chair. Alex handed it to Lily, giving her this whole speech about how the balloon would keep her safe and how important it was to hang on to it. I liked this new touch. I think a lot of parents would get anxious sending their kids into a stranger's property where they can't see them. The balloons keep track of where everyone is and help to massage those fears. Though I wondered if he considered who's supposed to give the balloons out. Alex told Lily to count to 30 and made for his hiding spot. I helped her count all the way to 30, and then she took off into the maze. I watched her balloon bob around. It would speed up abruptly or slow around corners. I heard a growl from a low-quality speaker ring out above the ambient Halloween music, followed by a little yelp from Lily. The balloon retreated and stopped. I could picture her gathering her courage. Sure enough, the balloon started making progress again. I stood on the sidewalk smiling to myself and shuffled my feet to stay warm. I was shocked to attention when I suddenly sensed movement nearby. I took a step back as 3 figures shambled past me without a word. I had been idly glancing around in boredom that entire time and hadn't seen them approach. The only car parked on the street was mine. I caught their profiles as they went. The person in the lead took great loping steps, throwing the weight of their bulky costume ahead of them. The torso was conversely thin with saggy skin, Thin hairs popped out of the top of their pale head. The middle one almost seemed to glide forward. Theirs was the least intricate costume, as they simply looked like someone hunched over in a burlap sack. I thought they must be on wheels, somehow. Trailing the trio was someone who looked to be attending a masquerade. I caught a flash of black contacts in the peripheral of their mask. They paid me absolutely no mind, like I wasn't even there. Must be friends of Alex's, I settled on. If anyone knew people who get that into Halloween so early, it was my brother. I was going to make a joke about needing more balloons, but they had already rounded the first corner of the maze. Lily's balloon was more than halfway through when I heard that growl again, tripped by the strangers. They must have been moving really fast, not exactly allowing time to stop and smell the corpses. Lily's balloon hit a straightaway near the end when I heard a startled squeak from her. The cry cut off abruptly, and the balloon wavered like a fishing bobber. It went end to end of that long corridor as if Lily was sprinting back and forth. It came to a halt and then just floated away. Lily had let go. I watched the balloon drift into the sky, feeling a cold sweat break out on my skin. The tense music from that stupid Halloween CD lent an air of ridiculousness to how I was feeling. "Lily?" I called out, trying to keep the concern from my voice. No response from anyone. "Lily?" I yelled into the first 5 feet of the maze. I heard wood scraping on wood off to my right. I ran to the edge of the maze and saw those 3 adult trick-or-treaters exiting through the chicken door. I expected them to say something, either to me or to each other, but they quietly made for the sidewalk. "Hey!" I shouted. The tall, pale one with the weird body stopped and turned to look at me. Their tiny yellow eyes narrowed even further in confusion. "Yeah, you!" I continued. "Who are you people?" The tall one looked around, its too wide mouth drawn in a grimace. The other 2 stopped on the sidewalk and waited for their companion. My eyes couldn't even focus on the one in the rough cloak. The tall one's gaze finally fell on the clown dummy behind me. It replaced the thin hairs on its head with bright red tufts sprouting from its scalp. Multicolored splotches broke out all over their body. With a look of satisfaction, it backed away again. What the hell?" I started. Noticing I was still upset with it, contentment gave way to rage as its massive mouth flashed into a snarl, baring countless grimy teeth. It roared and wobbled towards me. I fell back onto the grass and scrambled for the maze. Self-preservation screamed in tandem with concern for my daughter. I rammed into the flimsy plywood walls. I kept shouting Lily's name until everything was leveled. The world and I spun as I pored over the ruined decorations. It was impossible. Lily went in and I would have seen her come out. She had to be there. By the time I felt Alex shaking me back to my senses, the trio was gone. I collapsed when I found half of her button costume, the cardboard all mangled and torn, my mind reeling as to the origin of the tiny red flecks peppering the crumpled costume. Before the police put the curtains up, some neighbors came around to take pictures and tried to congratulate Alex on outdoing himself with the crime scene. We're still being questioned on Lily's disappearance, and apparently I'm being treated with a great deal of suspicion. The investigators are at least humoring bringing those trick-or-treaters in for questioning. Alex maintains he has no idea who they were and says that he never even saw them. The only theory I dare to hold is those 3 kidnapped Lily and concealed her as they escaped. And the transformation that thing went through, the way it seemed like a nocturnal predator caught in the light of day, that feeling I got that I shouldn't be able to look at them, I think it all comes back to our early Halloween activities. Halloween started for a reason, and I think we enjoyed the protection of our numbers provided. Similarly, I think they enjoyed the camouflage. I can only imagine the calamity when none of that happens this year. In 2nd grade, I decided I wanted to be a 2nd grade teacher. Not 1st grade, not 3rd, 2nd. At the time, wanting to teach that grade wasn't weird, but as the years went on, as I finished elementary school, then middle, then high, it really is pretty odd I always knew I'd teach 2nd grade. This odd, specific occupational requirement never left, even when I actually did get through college and become a teacher. So that's where I am today, a 28-year-old single woman and a 2nd grade teacher of 4 years now. Or I was. That's the problem. I was fired 2 months ago. The cute little school I worked at forever doesn't offer tenure, and I sincerely messed up. A mistake big enough to be fired immediately. The headmaster, that's what they call the principal at my charter school, told me himself he doesn't blame me, but with the angry parents' news coverage and investigations, it didn't really look good for the school to keep me. That's okay. I feel terrible for letting those kids see what they did. That's for later, though. It wouldn't make any sense yet. Let's just start with Halloween. Halloween was a big deal at the elementary school. Parties, decorations, a fall festival, you name it. Not a single wall of the school doesn't have some paper cutout of a witch or string of candy covering it. And for the 2 weeks leading up to Halloween, the teachers take turns selling apple cider after school to all the kids and parents picking them up. I was never honestly a very big Halloween person before teaching, but it really was fun. The school even gave each class a budget for Halloween parties. All I had to plan was 4 hours of party time. Fun, though admittedly not as easy as you'd think. Finding different activities to keep second graders busy without being too boring or too wild isn't simple. Yeah, I could have just put on a movie and let them play their own games the whole day, but I wanted to do something memorable, something fun. I came up with pumpkin carving. Yeah, I know. Carving pumpkins isn't the most original idea. Literally everybody already carves one for Halloween. But when I asked the class, most kids said their parents didn't let them help carve the pumpkin, just draw the face or clean out the guts. No actual carving. And they all seemed pretty excited when I told them they'd get to do it on Tuesday, Halloween. The school told me as long as the only things we used were those cheap $3 carving tools, they would let me send home a permission form to the parents. When the due date for the permission forms came, every single kid brought one in. Off to get the pumpkins. My budget, the one the school gave me, was enough for the decorations, some snacks, the carving kits, and probably half the pumpkins, but I knew I'd have to spend a bit out of my own pocket to buy the pumpkins. Yeah, I don't have much money, but I was willing to pay $70 for these kids to have a fun Halloween, not to mention for them to remember me as the best second grade teacher ever. The cheapest place was a small patch I found online. Most pumpkins were under $5, which sounded great. My only hesitancy was with the reports of 3 missing people in that area. Recent reports. Disappearances aren't a big deal if you're with a friend, but for a lone woman in her 20s, I had to be careful, even if risking that area would mean less money from my own pocket. Initially, I found the pumpkin patch immediately. From the freeway I took to get there, the fields of green and orange were in my view. Only a thin fence separated me and the people wandering the fields. But after I pulled off and onto the road leading up, things got less simple. I'm a terrible driver, honestly, I really am. Even worse with directions. Despite seeing the field the whole time, I couldn't for the life of me find the entrance. I literally drove around the whole pumpkin patch twice, not able to find a way in, and when I finally stopped at the side of the road and figured out directions, a parade came down the road I needed to travel on. Apparently, some middle school was having their homecoming football game that night, right on the only road that led to the only pumpkin patch entrance. In short, a disaster. I was exhausted, it was getting late, the place was closing in less than 30 minutes, and I could do nothing but sit and watch a flock of 7th grade cheerleaders flounce in their sickeningly short skirts. Looking down the street, there was still at least half a mile of parade floats and kids in costumes. Oh, and Halloween was the next day. Fuck this, I whispered. My second graders would have to be content with Charlie Brown Halloween on repeat because I was done. Time to turn around and go home. Crap. Looking at the line of cars behind me, I realized there was no room to turn my car around. A truck, the scraped-up kind you see rednecks driving around, though with a hatch covering the back, was bumper to bumper with me, stopping me from reversing enough to avoid the parade in my U-turn. Great. Just great. This day was amazing. I got out of my car and walked up to the idiot who didn't know the whole leave people room at a stoplight thing. Hey, I'm trying to turn around, I said after he rolled down his window. Would you mind pulling back a bit? He inhaled sharp and pointed away from me. Then the man, the one wearing a cliché cowboy hat, turned and smiled. Not a polite smile. There was no goodwill, friendly neighbor attitude in his face. It wasn't even angry. The smile was cold and somehow just off.
You don't want to watch the parade?
He asked, slowly, still smiling. His eyes gazed just a bit to the left of me. I was just trying to get into the patch, but there's no way I'll get to it in time now. It closes in a half an hour. The man blinked.
The parade will be done in 15 minutes. Run in and grab a pumpkin.
Yeah, well, I need 30 of them. Really, I was just wondering if you could reverse a few feet so I could...
30?
The smiling man let out a long, high whistle.
30 pumpkins the day before Halloween? Girl, what you need all those for?
Then he started laughing. A laugh just as unhinged as his smile. Just wrong. Without seeing a mirror, I knew red was creeping up the edges of my face. It really was ridiculous I'd waited this long. I know, I think I stuttered. It was just for my class. I'm a teacher and my second graders... Why are you laughing so much? Not to be rude, but I'm not in a great mood as it is.
Girl, I ain't laughing at you. I'm laughing at the odds.
The odds?
The odds that a pretty young thing like yourself would be looking for 30 pumpkins the same night I happen to be getting rid of 3 dozen.
My head cocked. The flush creeping into my face abated. What? He pushed his car door open and jumped out, laughing his head off still. It was then I knew, for a fact, even if this man could drive a car, even if he could hold a conversation, something in his head was distinctly not right. Some condition, some mental handicap. It didn't stop me from following him around the back of his car and watching as he popped his trunk. The hatch had obscured the insides before, but now they were fully visible, revealing dozens of small round orange gourds. Pumpkins, just like he said. He picked one up without saying anything and walked to my car. This was too weird. Wait, I called out and raced after him. You're just giving these to me?
Yep. Now pop open your trunk. We only got a few minutes to load all these before the parade is over.
For honestly, at least 10 seconds, I just stood, flustered, unsure how to react to this bizarre turn of events. Then, I started loading. Who cared if this man was odd, if it got my second graders a great Halloween party? If he was going to throw them away anyways. None of the things were big, each smaller than a soccer ball, but they were perfect for my kids. The only odd thing as I carried them was the tops. The pumpkins weighed about as heavy as they should without being cleaned out, but the top incision, the one around the stem that let you pull out the top like a lid, was done. On all of them. Are the insides clean? I shouted as he loaded the final pumpkin into my noticeably sunken down van. In the distance, the final parade float was nearing. He shook his head.
The guts are inside.
Somehow I randomly had ended up with 36 perfect-sized pumpkins with the tops already cut out and no charge at all. This was amazing. Thank you so much, I told the man. He winked and his smile grew wider, eerily wide.
No, thank you.
By the way, why were you throwing them away? Though his eyes had never fully made contact, this time he really was looking at something behind me.
The parade is over. We should get back in our cars.
He was right. I slammed my truck closed, got in my car and turned right. He turned left, and that was it. The end of my interaction with this strange off man. The next day, as my kids began pouring into my classroom, I could tell they were excited. The way they smiled at one another, wiggled in their seats, and slung their backpacks onto the floor was all more exuberant than normal. I couldn't blame them. I was the same. Everybody ready? I called out as I was met with a chaotic chorus of, yes! We laid out black trash bags over the table and cut holes in the top and sides of them to get into handmade aprons. Each kid stood obediently in front of their pumpkin with a spoon in hand, ones I had told them to bring. They were ready to scoop out the innards. Okay, I finally said, let's start. For 1 minute, one blissful minute, I was proud of myself. Look at me organizing all this and making my kids happy. I was a great teacher. Nothing could go wrong. Then came the red. Realizing the truth was the oddest part. It didn't happen suddenly. It hardly even happened at all. Really, it was just confusing. Why were kids suddenly screaming? Why were multiple of them puking over the carpet? What was going on? And why was there red? Dazed, I forced myself to the nearest pumpkin and stared inside. No. Inside the orange pumpkin, where a mass of string seeds and pumpkin guts should have been, was something very, very different. A heart. A human one, covered in intestines and blood. Each pumpkin was the same. The smiling man had told me the truth. guts are still inside. When the police came, they matched the DNA to the 3 people who had gone missing in the pumpkin patch area. I was fired the next day.